Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to this capabilities webinar, Get in Sprint Test Automation with all new live authoring. We are very excited about this capability, but I shall try to contain that excitement just long enough to tell you that this webinar will be recorded and you will receive a copy. The webinar culminates with a question and answer session where you can ask anything you like, including whether this webinar is being recorded. So please do think of questions. My name is Ryan Thornton, product marketer at Virtuoso, and I will be leading you through the next 30 minutes. I will be lovingly aided and abetted by my partner in test, a man who needs no introduction, Mr. James Bent. Hello, James.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, missed my cue there. Yeah, so my name is James Bent, head of sales engineering at Virtuoso. So I'm going to be doing the while Ryan has some fun stuff today, I'll be doing the really fun stuff of showing you the platform in terms of in-sprint authoring with Virtuoso. So really looking forward to that.
Yes, he does, of course, head up our sales engineering department and will be ensuring, as he's just said, that I am once again, and as always, the bridesmaid, as he has the pleasure of leading the demo section of this special occasion. Preceding the demo, we will have a short introduction to Virtuoso, how we deliver in sprint automation, and bring unity between development and QA departments. So as night follows day, so does item 1 of an agenda following the introductions of a webinar. I will start with a very brief introduction to Virtuoso, and we make sure ship happens faster. Make sure you've got your teeth in for that one, by harnessing the latest technology to deliver test hyperautomation. That's just to say we take all the lovely new technological advancements and make you able to automate more, to hyperautomate. Which brings us to in-sprint test automation. Ever since Hewlett first turned to Packard in their garage and said, we need faster feedback between the test and build stages, it has been understood that bringing these two stages closer together delivers better quality products. Those clever authors of the Agile Manifesto wanted test and build stages to happen simultaneously in sprint. But the speed at which one can author has made this more aspirational rather than a reality. And I understand that in CI/CD there is in sprint testing, but I speak here of meaningful in sprint test authoring with adequate test coverage. It's always been something of a marathon to get that done. And with live authoring, you can write tests at the speed of development and see that they work. And that is most important. And I'll try and explain that before the demo actually shows you how it actually works, by way of a graphic. With all hitherto methods, you have had to author, execute, didn't work, re-author, re-execute, didn't work, eat, sleep, repeat. With Virtuoso, we author, execute, and validate the test simultaneously by using bots on a headless browser, which James will show you shortly, as we've mentioned a fair few times. This means you can actually do the good stuff while you're at work, which is looking for bugs. The reason why we do QA, not to try and make the tests work. So now we're finding bugs. Fantastic. Now it would be great if we could share the environment where the bug was found with the dev team. That would mean all bugs were always reproducible, which would mean the sad end to a meme, and nobody wants to kill off a meme, but it would be an important step. And with live authoring, you can share the bug and its environment as a URL. Then use the dev tools that you're familiar with from Google Chrome on that specific environment where the bug has been found to debug. Now, before someone calls for a plumber, I should stop being a gas man and let the capability speak for itself. I do believe we have a drum roll.
Excellent. Yes, we do. Thank you very much, Ryan. Yeah, so look, I mean, some really great sort of intro there, Ryan. Thank you very much. But really, you know, the best thing we can do is absolutely show you the platform. So I'm going to be taking you through Virtuoso, particularly around what we're here to sort of talk about in sprint testing. So now Virtuoso, I must say that we do have a whole heap of capability, which we won't necessarily cover today. We are going to talk around what we're showing is not the only means to be able to author tests, but what we're going to show is how this great new capability does enable you to deliver in sprint testing, but also to write working automation really easily so you can focus on the good stuff, which is making valid tests and finding bugs, as Ryan mentioned. So number one, you can see on screen that I'm sharing Virtuoso. We are a SaaS platform. We're cloud-based, which means it's really easy to get you on board. You don't need any infrastructure. You just come on board. We get you into an organization and you can start creating projects immediately, where a project could be for each of your customers, your applications. The project is just the easy way to contain your testing goals, your scope of testing, or a goal could be like a regression pack, for example. Now within Virtuoso, you can definitely do things like write tests from requirements, from BDDs, for example, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Because actually what we're going to focus on today is the way that you can use our fantastic new capability, which is called live authoring, to be able to write tests in plain English, to be able to immediately see that those steps execute so you know that they are working, but also to start thinking then, sort of focusing more on what you are testing without the headache of being able to thinking about how to maintain or fix your tests. So let's get straight into that. And really, what are we talking about in terms of live authoring? Well, number one with Virtuoso is you write tests predominantly in natural language. So use simple interactions like navigate or click or write. And then really you're just using a hint of what you see on screen. And what do I mean by that? So for example, here I can see in a live browser window inside Virtuoso, we're doing this on a banking website where the first thing that's come up is to accept all the cookies. So what are we going to do? I could say simply click on, and let's do accept all cookies. So I'm not using any XPath or IDs here. I'm just simply writing the label that I see on screen. When I click on save, that step is going to immediately execute. So you can see immediately in the live browser, it's gone ahead and clicked on that. And I can check that as well, because if I click on this step, go to the screenshots, I can see that it did indeed interact with that element. Again, all I had to do was write in plain English with just a hint of what's on screen. And I will talk a little bit of what's going on under the hood in just a moment, but to give you an idea of sort of how quick and powerful this is to write robust automation, let's go ahead and write some more steps. For instance, we could mouse over the loans in the header, for example. And again, by doing that, as soon as I write that test step, you can see it goes green, which means it's actually executed. What this also means is that it's validated that that step works. So instead of, let's say, capturing it and just recording it down, what I've done is written the step, then it is executed and shows me that yes, it works. I know that I've got working automation. So in this case, I'm going to go through and let's say click on personal loans, because frankly, I need a bit more money. I want to buy a new car. So let's click on personal loans. And by doing that, again, you can sort of start to get the gist. We write the step and then it executes. We get the validation on screen in terms of what's working. Now, because we've changed pages, then while we are working to completely get rid of wait times altogether, let's put in a wait, which can be our dynamic wait time, to say, wait for make your plans a reality. So something on the next page that has loaded. And what we're doing there is creating a dynamic wait time. Either wait up to 20 seconds or once make your plans a reality has loaded, the test moves on. So you have these really dynamic waits to make the test really efficient. So far you can see we've done clicking, we've done a mouse interaction, we've done a wait. How about doing things like scrolling? So I'm going to scroll to an element, and I could actually, in the live window, I can do a check and say, well, maybe I want to look for, I don't know, I would like to borrow. Let's scroll to I would like to borrow. So by saying scroll to I would like to borrow, then it goes ahead and performs that action, scrolling so that I would like to borrow is at the top of the screen. We can do things like writing. So maybe the car I want to buy is £15,000. So let's go ahead and write 15,000 in the input next to I would like to borrow. And by doing that, we can see it's got ahead and written on screen. So you can start to get an idea, the speed at which we're doing this. So you can imagine this, and I've called this exploring, which, we can really sort of think about two really key cases here. One could be that in Sprint, your developers are creating the new features, and within the sprint, depending on the release cadence, if you're doing CI/CD, for instance, Virtuoso hooks into CI/CD pipelines. So if you're just creating a feature and rolling it out throughout the sprint, then as part of your CI/CD, you could also hook this up to execute tests in Virtuoso. Now, once those features are developed, you could immediately come in and start writing the test steps against those features to be able to create the automation. And as you can sort of get a gist of, this is pretty straightforward to write. So actually, you're not reliant on having to write in script or write with XPath or IDs. So actually, we have users who are manual testers, BAs, product owners, writing these tests really, really quickly. And again, because we can see it executing, it's valid automation. Now, I've been writing this, but also I can actually interact with the screen. So by clicking here, you can see the inspect element. Maybe I want to store this APR rate into a variable. So let's store that in APR. And by doing that, what I'm now doing is storing the data that appears on screen into a variable. So in that case, I've stored the APR. Now that could be because the next thing I want to do is I want to assert that. So let's assert that APR equals, for example, 2.8%. And that's so we can just do a check. And by the way, we can also facilitate using test data. So you could actually use a parameter in the test data to check that the APR meets an expected value. It just starts to give you an idea of the range of interactions you can do, all using natural language. If I want to interact with this element here, the minus icon, again, I could use the inspect. I could right click and say, click on this element, which now goes and reduces the term down to 4 years. So you can start to get an idea of how you've actually got this real sort of blended approach, whether I'm writing, whether I'm clicking, whether I'm choosing different actions to be able to write. And again, every time I write those, if it goes green, it's working. So for instance here, what if I wanted to go and say, click on the apply button, but unknown to me, well, I've gone and spelt it incorrectly. What we're going to see, the step fails. Immediately, as I'm authoring, I get the feedback that that step is not working. So what do I do here? Well, I could come in and click on this and then change the hint, for example, and just type over the top of this. But actually, to be really quick and easy, I could just click on fix step. I can come across to the element, which is the apply button. And then by clicking on that, it fixes the test and goes ahead and clicks on that element and moves us to the next screen again. So actually, even when you're authoring, even if you get something wrong, even if it doesn't click quite the right thing, or for some reason you put a typo, you can easily fix those steps to be able to interact. We can do things like interacting with different parts of the screen. So for instance, I could do an assertion, which could be to look for I accept, if I can type, the key facts document. So what we're doing now is giving some context to be able to say, look for a particular piece of text on screen. Because next what I'm going to do is write quite a generic step, which is to click on the left checkbox. Now there are two checkboxes here, and I'm not giving any sort of command here to specify apart from this look for to be able to give the bot some context. So by writing that, you can see it's gone ahead and clicked in the right box. So you can imagine while we're doing this on a front-end banking website, for example, we actually have customers using Virtuoso to test on Salesforce, SAP S/4HANA, ServiceNow. It could be e-commerce stores. And of course, you can get to the point where you have multiples of the same element. This is a great example. So to be sure to be able to click the right elements using these look for commands to be able to pick those is really, really useful to ensure that actually, even though we're writing in plain English, you're able to pick the correct elements. Now, as Ryan mentioned as well, we can do something further because while, of course, you can write using, let's say, the hint or the label of what you see on screen, we do also within the browser preview, we have what we call our advanced mode. And by clicking into the advanced mode, you immediately get the page console available, which actually is interactive and it's live based on the page that I'm on. And so in here, for example, if I want to come in and inspect, I could click on the little inspect icon here, come up, and let's say for this particular button, I could then look and I can get the class name. And actually, if you really want to, you could use those class names to be able to click on the screen. So for example, I could write a step to click on that particular button, for example, using the class name. So you've actually got a lot of flexibility here in terms of how you can write these tests. Predominantly, you would be using the natural language with just the hint you see on screen, but then actually expanding this out to really give you these insights, whether it's looking at the page source or drilling through the different tabs within the page console. Then you start to get the sort of real power that is firstly a great entry point because it's really easy to start doing this, but then it sort of expands out. Including to note, we also let you write small extensions, which could be JavaScripts to execute as part of your tests. So again, while you can use predominantly the natural language to write your functional end-to-end tests of any browser application, you really can extend this out as well. Even to the point that we do have API testing. And so in the context, you think within this, running this loan application within a front-end banking website, well, a typical scenario for testing would be that while you may test the front-end website for, in this case, a customer coming and applying for a loan, a great scenario that we get involved in or Virtuoso is used for is then to say, well, when the loan application is made, then APIs are called to be able to pass that data into a backend system, such as it could be, I don't know, a Salesforce or an Oracle, SAP S/4HANA, where firstly, you can actually test multiple sites in the same journey. For example, here I could say, this is my SAP, and I could now navigate to, let's say, my SAP URL. So you can actually do this multi-application testing. However, what we also enable, and this is still within the frame of this in-sprint testing, is to say, set up API calls, where, for example, I could create API collections. In this case, I'm going to use a get users API, which any of you who are familiar with tools like Postman or Swagger and so on, quite similar in terms of being able to build API calls, including things like putting the tokens, authorizations in, building the body, the inputs, mapping the outputs. So you can definitely start building API calls. But actually the power here is to say, and this absolutely is part of your in-sprint testing, is to say, as you build out your functional journeys, your user-focused tests, actually within that, you can make API calls. So it could be to use the details from the test and then make an API call where you could pass in, let's say, the APR or the loan amount that appears on screen into the API call. And then again, as part of your live authoring, we execute that API call as part of that test. We store the responses. So you can see, you can drill in and get the data that's returned. Even through, I could want to then maybe assert that, for example, the response.data.data.email equals an expected value. For example, in this case, we're returning this email address. I can make an API call at the start of my test, again, even when I'm live authoring, to be able to, let's say, go and make a call to obtain customer and loan amounts to be able to input into my test in a parameterized way. So it's really just to highlight how using this, we've just created automation that we already know is going to work because we've seen every step go green. When I'm done, I click, I'm done. It goes ahead and persists that execution, so basically finalizes that. And we now have automation that is ready to run. Whether, again, that's from your pipelines, from CI/CD tools, or whether I go ahead and execute this from plans, or in this case, I'll do this one manually. Basically, as we run these, Virtuoso is launching a headless browser. We're launching bots which will go ahead and run through the test. We'll capture screenshots for all the interactions. But really importantly here as well, Virtuoso is capturing all of the element selectors available for each of the elements. So to give you an idea of what that looks like for each of these steps, you can see that we're automatically populating the XPaths, the IDs, the class names. So just by writing these simple steps, which pretty much anybody can do, as long as they know the flows of the application, you can create immediate automation that works, automatically builds the technical side of each of those elements being explored, whether it's XPaths, IDs, class name, whatever is available. But what that also means is that we combine that when you run the tests with what we call self-healing. And for Virtuoso, what we're saying there is that we are using, when we execute the tests, when you run them every single time on every execution, we will look at the previous model of each of the elements and then using algorithms basically compare to the current model, whether it's an XPath change or an ID change, for example, could have occurred. We then self-heal that as the test is running. And that is at the speed of the application running, as you can see from the load times here. So what you're building is robust automation that's easy to build, that's interactive, whether you're writing or actually interacting with the screen. A really great range of different actions, including doing more sort of end-to-end testing, inclusive APIs and multiple system flows. So that what you're freed up to do is then think about actually, what is it you want to test? Build more valid tests quicker in sprint or very soon after. But then from there as well, you can focus on thinking about actually, because the automation's running, you're not worried about saying when it runs, I've now got to try and fix it because, well, you know, somehow this test didn't run. It was a bit flaky. Maybe the XPaths changed or the IDs adjusted. So it's caused the test to break. You're not maintaining the test itself. What you're doing is thinking about actually focusing on test outputs. And the way we represent that is to say at the test level, because we get these clear indicators, the green steps have passed, the red ones have failed. We drill that up to whether it's the journey view or up into the dashboards to filterable project activity. You can clearly now come in and firstly, anybody can read this. You can give the context, the environment, the screenshots. So you could bring the developers in. They can read the test, see the evidence. But by clicking on, let's say, a bug that was discovered, they can also drill into our root cause analysis, where they can see, among other things, the page source at the time the test was running, given that we version all of our test executions. You get the page network, so you can drill in and get all the headers, resources, timings, and the page console logs. So you're getting these contextualized insights that if a bug is found and discovered, it's immediately surfaced in a really easy to read and visible way, alongside the root cause analysis, or it could be actually, again, inspecting within the advanced mode. So you can start to see within the live browser screen, start to get the same similar sorts of insights as well, to be able to see why something is failing. So if a bug is discovered, it is surfaced immediately, whether it's in the authoring step, as I find that, whether it is as the tests are being repeatedly executed, as I see in my test executions. It really is about creating a means for people to control the way they author tests, the way that they validate that they're working, and the way that they then are able to run those and commit them into their regression packs, smoke tests, end-to-end tests, and really, again, focus more on creating valid automation as opposed to just being burdened with maintaining automation. So hopefully that has been a really good insight for you in terms of what we're sort of meaning by this. I do see we've got quite a few, I think, questions rolling up in the chat. So probably at this stage, you know, of course, before we start answering those, if anybody is interested and wants to know more, because we certainly have a whole heap of different capability and ways this can be applied, of course, we would love to invite you to have a further discussion. But to that point, I think, Ryan, we can probably look at some of the Q&A or questions that have come up. So to that point, let me see. And I think, Ryan, you...
One second there, James. Sorry, I was on mute, so I missed my cue, but that's one each. 1-1, we're playing for a draw now. So to James's previous point, I'm going to launch a poll and it's a quick question. Would you like to be given priority for a personalized demo? Has Mr. Bent left you wanting more? If you would like to be prioritized, please do press the yes button in the poll that you see in front of you, and I'll leave that open for another 5 seconds. In fact, while that's occurring, James, would you like to go through some of the questions you've seen there?
Yeah, and I do see it. Thank you very much to Ryan, but also Tessa, who I've seen have already been answering some within the chat there. I do think that I saw we have within, if I can find, there we go, our Q&A. So great. So some questions are, okay, so this is a good one. I mean, of course, we can demo things. Well, I was going to say really well, but that's basically saying that I'm good at doing demos, but we can make things look as best as we can. So the question here is around, how easy actually this, how well does this actually work? And can you basically trial and evaluate this self? As I'm combining a few questions here. So the answer is, number one, if I work in reverse order, is absolutely. If you want to be able to get hands on this and test this on your own website, then absolutely reach out. And of course, we can facilitate that. At the end of the day, proof's in the pudding, and we basically need this to work for you. There's no point anybody coming on board if it doesn't work for you. In terms of how easy actually is this? So if I talk on typical times to get on board, so we have a great customer success and onboarding team. We've got great documentation. We've even got a certification that you can take, which takes you through step by step how to get on board. It is very intuitive. There are a few things to learn, but if you come on board, you would be writing tests on your first day of using the platform. And that is what we see across all of the customers who come on board, from small, medium, through to enterprise customers. So I hope that does make sense. And I see there is another question, which is, what can this be used to test? So Virtuoso, we're focused on browser-based applications. So anything that's via a browser, that could be a Salesforce, it could be an SAP S/4HANA, it could be a front-end website, like a banking website, e-commerce store. If it's browser-based, if it's got a URL, we can test it, even on private networks. So while we are a cloud application, then we have what we call a bridge client that you can use to test on private networks. So hopefully that gives a good answer there. Then I see another question: how can we apply
good juicy one?
Yeah, how can we apply multiple conditions for validating expected outputs? So here, look, we've taken the spin that instead of, let's say, putting in, let's say, if statements. So if I do this, then that. Actually, we've made it so easy that you can reuse tests from any particular point to create individual journeys. So actually, instead of embedding conditions within tests, which then you have to go back and maintain, I know they can be very useful. Actually, it's so easy to create multiple tests, which tests each of those conditions or scenarios separately. That said, through using things like our extensions, you can absolutely embed some logic to be able to say, if there is a specific case, then you can be able to test conditions. The great thing here, though, while I can give you a few sort of inputs, that is exactly what our customer success and onboarding team is here for, to assist you with working out the best way to test, where certainly there is some transformative benefit to Virtuoso. You actually can change the way you automate. And I see as well that there's a question around, can we do mobile automation? So in Virtuoso at this stage, you can test on mobile browser. We're not testing native apps at this stage, though we do have some partnerships with mobile automation to be able to leverage, being able to test on mobile. And also it is an area that we are monitoring quite closely as to whether we expand our capabilities to do so. But at this stage, browser-based, but certainly we can do cross-browser and cross-device testing on different browsers. Okay. I think that might
And if you have a hybrid.
Yeah, sorry. Definitely.
And if you have a hybrid app, we could do native. It's not native because it's hybrid, obviously, but that's another area that we can look at. Do you think that's for whom the bell tolls there, James?
I think it is. I mean, if we haven't given enough to give a bit of a tickle and see if somebody wants to have a bit further chat, we certainly don't bite. Well, neither Ryan or I do. So we'll be more than happy to have a further discussion. And yeah, otherwise, thank you very much, everyone, for attending this webinar. We look forward to you rolling out some other great topics for you to attend to learn about as well.
So, yes, we don't bite. Well, only on a Thursday. So it just remains for me to say thank you for making time in your busy schedules. Thank you for not asking me if this webinar has been recorded and going to be sent out to you. It certainly will. Thank you to Mr. James Bent for his eloquent explanation of our newer test authoring capabilities. Good evening, everybody. Ciao, ciao for now, and have an absolutely great week. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.